At this point, anything's possible. I don't think it'll be a meteorite. I think it's going to be a nuclear weapon.
Well, look, I mean, and
Same.
according to the Ayatollah of Iran, it could be tonight. But we'll get to that, I'm sure, in due course.
You have to have some sense of humor because otherwise this gets really dark real quick.
Yeah. This is why survivors of actual wars and civil wars and so forth, natural disasters tend to have very dark humor. It is a genuine coping mechanism.
Yeah, it's the only way to get through it.
It's also, by the way, why times of war give us our funniest comedians. It's no coincidence that Charlie Chaplin, etc., Three Stooges, when you look at sort of where they came out of, they became huge during war, or they came out of that and they took the life experiences they gained in war and turned that into comedy. And our entertainment becomes very light and fluffy during wartime and becomes really dark during good times.
Yes.
And you'll notice during the 90s through to sort of 2000 and teens, we turned all of the superheroes dark. All of the movies got darker.
Yes.
And that was the trend all through that time. Well, that's because historically that was a really good couple of decades. We didn't really have a lot of trauma or drama in our lives, and we went looking for it in our entertainment. I suspect the entertainment for the next 10, 15 years is going to be comparatively fluffy.
Excellent. I don't wish World War III to happen, but as I always say, every podcast, when you look at history, what comes out the other side is quite collaborative, quite a reset, and I do think at some point something is going to have to happen to cause that reset. I don't think it's going to happen on its own. Yeah,
and there are too many vested interests to let it happen peacefully. I mean, I'm trying to avoid going straight to the Iran-Israel situation right now, but I will. It seems to me that is a perfect example of a deep state war.
I agree.
Where they sat there and said, hang on, Trump isn't a warmonger. He didn't start a war in his first 4 years as president, the first president in my lifetime to do that.
But we need a war.
Yeah, we can't go another 4 years without a new war. Afghanistan is wound down. Ukraine's not really giving us what we need. We need a war. We need that money. And so they've turned around and gone through back channels, it would appear, without the knowledge of Donald Trump. And they've goaded Israel into a strike. Yes, the narrative is that Iran were days away from having a nuclear weapon. Well, that contradicts an intelligence report from only 3 months ago where the US intelligence community came together and they reported that they did not believe Iran was actually actively working towards nuclear weapons. Let's not forget there is an extensive monitoring regime that does go on. So they do have information from inside the country. And before people mock that, have a read of the book Saddam Defiant. It was written by Richard Butler. I read it some decades ago. And that was all about him as one of the head UN nuclear inspectors in Iraq. And he talks in detail about the lengths that Iraq would go to try and avoid the inspections. They would request access to a site and it wouldn't be given to them for 3 months. And then when they arrived, it would have been just freshly cleaned and swept and completely empty. Oh, this whole warehouse is just sitting empty the whole time, but we couldn't let you in for 3 months. Kind of nonsense. Yes, there are games that get played. We know what those games are. And when the US intelligence community comes out and says, we don't believe that Iran are actually going to be capable of a nuclear weapon in the foreseeable future because they're not actively working on the right things to get there. And then 3 months later, we're told they're days away from having a bomb. We have to do a preemptive strike. It feels to me like the military-industrial complex. Let's not forget that President Dwight Eisenhower, former commander of US forces during World War II, turned president of the United States. He personally turned around in his parting address from being the president of the United States and warned against the military-industrial complex and the fact that they would have an appetite for endless war. We have a president who is days away from potentially starting to normalize relationships with Iran. And then all of a sudden this preemptive strike comes in. It feels, I'm not saying that Iran are the good guys. Multiple things can be true at once. I posted about this on the other day on my social media and people jumped on, oh, but Iran, is chanting death to America and death to Israel. Yes, that's true. Multiple things can be true.
The Ayatollah are chanting that. The Iranian people are not chanting that.
There is a proportion. The people that want to be in the good books of the Ayatollah are, but there is also a strong revolutionary streak in Iran. Let's not forget the Ayatollah has power in Iran because of the CIA. Let's not forget this is another Afghanistan. This is another Osama bin Laden. These people were made by the CIA with American taxpayer funds and now have turned on the CIA, with good reason in my opinion. But this actual war, this actual moment of conflict, sorry, it's going to piss a lot of people off, but it looks like a deep state war to me.
I unequivocally agree. None of this adds up. All of it, I was going to go through the topics, but we're here. Let's just embrace. I'm going to regret saying this, but Netanyahu's a warlord. Sorry. I think he wants the war. He's cheering the war on. And that's not me saying that Israel's bad. I want to be really clear with my sentiment here.
Yeah.
I don't think this has got anything to do with the people of Iran or Israel. It's got to do with, like you said, it's just deep state. It's just concentrating power, moving money around, and flexing muscles. And I've said this to Gareth. We've talked about this extensively. You know, because everyone paints Putin as this bad guy. Not to say that he's a good guy. I'm not saying that. Like you said, multiple things can be true.
Multiple things can be true, yeah.
I understand these people. I have met plenty of men like this personality type, which is bombastic, very egotistical, right? Trump is very easy to understand. Putin, very easy to understand. Both of them care more about their legacy than anything.
Sure.
The way they are perceived, the way that people interpret what they're doing, that matters to these people. So that makes it really easy to understand and plan their next move.
Sure.
Neither Trump or Putin want to be known as the person who pressed the big red button.
Yeah.
They just don't.
Yeah.
Neither of them want that on their legacy.
I'm just gonna hit that.
Oh, sorry. Oh.
There we go.
I was going to talk about Tulsi in a second.
Well,
But anyway,
okay, but you can switch back.
Okay.
I'm just like we're riffing.
We're riffing. Sorry. I can't rant and run the.
So let's talk a bit more about the Bibi thing, because this is really interesting. And I think Zelensky is another example of a similar kind of situation where
Useful puppets or?
no, Bibi's more than a puppet. Okay, I'll give him his due. He is a genuinely intelligent man, and I think he's done some great things along the way. But he's also now been in and out of these positions of power for decades, working very closely with the United States intelligence community, because they have collaborated very closely in the past. And if the deep state wanted a war, they could very easily go to Bibi and say, hey, listen, just quietly, off the record, this has been approved.
Yeah, okay.
Right, we're not going to say that it's been, but off the record, you really need to do this. And by the way, we've got the intelligence to back this up. Bibi might be the bad guy, or he might be being used as the patsy in this case.
Yeah.
Was he aware that Donald Trump was going to come out and say, I didn't approve that. That was all done without me. What was the line of communication? What was the back channel? Bibi's been in that world for decades.
Yeah.
Would have a lot of people that he would trust. And if they chose to break that trust for their own purposes on this occasion, I think that would have worked.
Yeah. My frustration with all of this is that the rest of us, your average citizen, is just cannon fodder.
Correct.
And this is where, like, you know, I'm very, very choice with my words around the whole Palestine-Israel thing, whatever. I think that Hamas is evil. I think that a lot of things around fundamental Islam is evil.
Yep.
It's inherently incompatible with any civil rights, any human rights.
We'll get to a bit more of that in a minute.
Having said that, do I want to see people being mercilessly killed and eradicated? Of course I don't.
Yeah.
I'm also, sorry, I don't know what I'm seeing. You know, everyone's like, oh, look at the videos. You don't know what you're looking at. None of it. This is like a social media war as well.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to get engaged in that war porn and feel like your heart's coming out of your chest.
Yeah.
But to be honest, half of it's probably either sensationalized or not real.
We know of actual fakes. So there are proven fakes that have been released by Hamas and by the Palestinian authorities to say, hey, this is what the consequence of Israel's actions were. Sometimes they were actually a misfire from a Hamas munition. Sometimes they were completely staged.
Yeah.
And we have behind the scenes footage, other angles and so forth showing the sort of the direction and the making of that piece of propaganda. And what happens when you do that is the same thing that happens when Amber Heard falsely accuses Johnny Depp. Well, now all of a sudden, because we know that the fake exists, we can't just trust everyone and everything else. And so the efforts to win sympathy through fakes in that particular conflict has unfortunately caused us to have to be skeptical about everything, including the stuff that is real.
I think it's also making your average person incredibly cynical.
Yeah.
At this point,
and
people...
desensitized.
Yes. Desensitized. And I have a real issue with people sharing the Palestinian thing on social media for a couple of reasons. Now, I understand why people are doing it.
Sure.
They're like...
And human suffering is terrible. And caring about it is good and can put my cards on the table, and I think you'll agree with this. I regard the Palestinian Authority as a terrorist organization, but the people they primarily terrorize are the Palestinians.
Correct. Their own people.
That's my position.
Yeah. And I do believe that a lot of their population serves a purpose.
Yeah.
They don't care about their population.
Yeah,
like I said, it's cannon fodder.
Yeah.
But what I have a real issue with is the way that people approach conflict like this. People who, and look, I want to be really careful with my words. I'm not trying to say that you're an idiot. No, I'm not trying to talk down to people. What I'm saying is people who, like literally 2 years ago, didn't know anything about this conflict and now self-confessed experts. And everything that comes up, they jump on it. They've got to share it. This happened. They just killed 7 babies. Oh, my God, they've just bombed this.
What just happened to the 18,000 people that were going to die within days?
Right.
What happened with them? Sorry, if that was real, we would have video footage of all of those bodies in the streets. Where is that?
And then you see the footage of the Palestinians breaking into that Hamas warehouse and finding all the food. And and my point is with this is like, it's really hard for me to go on social media, see a photo of someone's dog and then an update of them in their new dress and then a child like amputated. And then the next thing it's like a sunny day in bloody Europe. And then it's like, oh, here's another child dead. It's jarring and it's ultimately actually not helping the cause because what you're doing is normalizing this kind of terror to the point where, like you said, people switch off from it. They disengage. Yeah. And I think there needs to be an avenue where people can express their concern and their outrage. Yeah. But the way we've weaponized this whole Palestinian thing to be like, again, it's just virtue signaling. It's become a social justice issue. I'm not saying that those who care are bad people, but it's been weaponized, just like Ukraine was weaponized, just like Black Lives Matter was weaponized.
If you care about that more than the suffering that is happening in Australia, which, okay, that kind of suffering is not happening in Australia, I get that. But you can do something about what's happening over here. Right. If you're all about that and all about caring and bleeding for that, but you won't lift a finger for the old lady down the street or the homeless person.
Well, no, you've just nailed it. You've actually just nailed the problem. Is the lifting a finger part is where they draw the line. Yeah. It's really easy, and I'm sorry, but it's so easy to just share some war porn on your socials. Yeah. It takes literally nanoseconds to just share and write some little ranty post. Actually getting off your butt, putting your phone down and going and, I don't know, volunteering at a food bank or going and volunteering at something and helping, that takes effort.
Well, do you remember the greatest in history, the greatest social movement that led to tens of thousands of people getting on boats and planes and traveling to Africa and assembling a citizen army and taking on a terrible warlord who was enslaving children? You remember that? It was the Coney 2012 campaign and it went massively viral. And remember hundreds of thousands, millions of likes, people making videos about how evil Coney was. And remember how they had that day where everyone was going to get together and protest, and then out of that we formed a citizens army and they went and they defeated Coney, and now Coney will never be able to terrorize children again. You remember how that ended? Yeah, it didn't quite end like that. It ended with nobody showing up.
Correct.
Because crossing that barrier from the digital world to the physical world, even just showing up in a park was too much for all but about a dozen people. Yeah. And yet it was the viral sensation of that year.
You've just watched another short clip from the Oddcast, and if you'd like to see the full video, it is over at our dedicated channel. That is the Oddcast HQ on YouTube. We will see you there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and have a chat in the comments.